Kia ora, g'day. Welcome back once again here with part 2 of my reaction to Mr. Chris VanSant on the Sean Ryan Show. He's at the stage where he's talking about joining the military. So let's jump in.
How old were you when you joined?
17 when I originally signed up.
17?
Yeah, but 18 by the time I went off to the service. Graduated high school in 95 and then went to basic training at the end of that summer. I had a job down the beach. I was an ocean lifeguard, so I wanted to get like my full
Oh, nice.
summer in. I wanted to enjoy that last
I'll bet
summer.
that was a rewarding experience.
You know what? Still to this day, and anybody that's ever been there or been through like ocean lifeguard training or like rookie weeks or they do their own version of a hell week, and that was some of the hardest shit I've ever done.
Really?
As an in shape, and I was a skinny, wiry little dude, so like I could run and things like that, but I was a skinny guy. But rookie week lifeguard training to earn a spot on the beach patrol was one of the hardest physical things I've ever done.
No shit.
Swimming and running. I mean, it's probably a lot of what you guys do in buds, and I don't have that, experience. But a lot of the things that I did in special operations and courses that I went to and selections that I went through, I think part of the digging into how do I get through this was honestly some of those memories about how bad that 1 week of my life sucked when I was a kid.
No shit. I wasn't expecting that at all.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And it sort of ties in with some of the questions that I get asked and sharing that about how do you build that mental resilience and this and that with regards to preparation for selection. And like Chris seems like no different, but I think for anybody, getting through and having to adapt and adjust to the things that you're having to do through growing up when you look back and connect the dots, all of those things, in my opinion anyway, and in my experience, play a part with not only the physical preparation and ability, but also the mental scarring, which flows on and helps with regards to if you're doing a selection course, as an example, or even things that aren't selection related.
I was referring to the women.
Yeah.
But,
Well, it's probably the best job to have at the beach. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
But it was a good time. So I enjoyed that last summer, and I went in the service when I was 18, right after the end of that summer.
What were your parents thinking about? Were they behind it? They wanted you to go in the military?
I think it was a combination. I think they both wanted me to go to college. I think my dad wanted to at least me to give a shot at playing ball at the next level because I had some talent. I think my mom was scared to death. Looking back all these years later, I've never asked her about it, but I think, my mom was a little kid when my grandfather was going through some things post World War II, so he got back, whatever year he got home, 44, 45, somewhere in there. And she was born in 1950. And so a lot of her early childhood, he struggled with addiction and some other things. And as she says, all these years later, the man that you got as a grandchild is a completely different man than I had when I was that age.
Yeah.
So I think she had some fears from that made her a little worried about it. But
Interesting.
But for the most part, they were good with the decision. That end of that summer, I shipped off to basic training.
Right on. Where did you go? Where was your first unit that you showed up to after basic?
Yeah, basic, airborne school, and then the Ranger Indoctrination Program, or RIP. And so my first unit was 3rd Ranger Battalion.
Oh, no shit. You did get right in.
I did. There were some hiccups along the way that had nothing to do with me. I ended up going to RIP. I ended up getting recycled in RIP because I missed a recall formation on a weekend in the middle of the course, like 2 weeks in. And instead of kicking us out, there were like 11 of us. They just recycled us all. So I did RIP twice, which was cool because I met a bunch of guys early on in my Ranger career that I still know to this day. I got 2 classes instead of 1 of guys that did that. You know what I mean? You know how it is.
Yep.
But I got through RIP, went to 3rd Ranger Battalion.
I'm just pausing there because I don't know much about anything about the RIP program. I can't even remember what he said it stood for. Ranger Indoctrination Program, I think is what he said. But there's that's an awesome thing, or awesome attitude, I should say, to have getting recycled. I guess must be like getting back squatted and having to repeat and go through it again, it sounds like. So he's part of 2 classes and making friends within 2 cohorts and people that he's still friends with to this day. That's a really like a great outcome, but also a good way to look at it. There's a lot of people from a selection viewpoint or a selection standard. There'd probably be some people that, or not probably, there are some people that might get through and be doing okay, but for whatever reason get told not this time, but you can come back again. And for a lot of them, it's like, I'm not worried about, I'm not going to come back if you don't want to take me this time. I'm not prepared to go away and then come back and do it again. So, interesting. That just stuck out to me. A good attitude to have.
And this was, 95, 96. So, at the time, you had B Company 375 is the company that was involved in Somalia in the Black Hawk Down incident in 93. So there was a lot of, and then you still had like Grenada Raiders and Panama guys that were still around the battalion. So even though it was peacetime war and we weren't involved in anything at the time, there was quite a bit of legacy and history in 3rd Ranger Battalion.
Yeah, I'll bet you showed up with a shit ton of experience on board. I haven't had any Rangers on yet. And I understand the difference, but I think a lot of the civilian population do not understand the difference. There's tabbed Rangers and there's schoolhouse Rangers, and it is confusing for a lot of people. Can you kind of clean that up a little bit? Yeah,
I mean, Ranger School is an Army school. For a lot of years, I don't know what they classify it as now, but for a lot of years, the people defined it as a leadership course. And I think it still is to this day. It's about leading small units in combat, preparation and understanding of operations orders, patrolling, basically small unit tactics in various environments. Ranger Regiment is a unit. So when you first go to the Ranger Regiment, you are not Ranger qualified. You haven't been to Ranger School, even though you were serving in the Ranger Regiment. Part of the pipeline for you as a young soldier in the Ranger Regiment is to attend Ranger School. So typically guys do it early on in their career when they're a young private or a specialist. They go to Ranger School, they earn their Ranger tab, then they come back and they're prepared, mentally, intellectually for that next leadership position, which is a team leader. Anyone can go to Ranger School. It's typically part of the pipeline, and infantry officers and combat arms officers in the Army, typically they go to Ranger School right away to gain that leadership and experience training and that hardship and overcoming that before they go out and lead troops. So there is a difference. There's lots of guys in the service that have never been an Army Ranger that have a Ranger tab and are called Ranger qualified.
So I think I may have misspoke. Is it a regimental?
He cleaned that up, makes it a lot easier for me to understand, but still just that last piece is probably the piece that then just stumped me again. So it's a Ranger school. It is a school. Go there, learn all those small tactics, small team tactics, etc. Ready for the next step up. Ranger Regiment is a unit. You can have some guys in there that are not Ranger qualified because they haven't been to Ranger school. And then at some point, I'm guessing they go through there to earn their tab and then go back to regiment, be qualified, and man, so that's a process, all right. She's a big beast over there.
Ranger versus a tabbed Ranger, or is a schoolhouse Ranger versus a tabbed Ranger?
There's how do I say it?
Yeah, how do you say it?
If you ever served in the Rangers, so in the Ranger Regiment, 1st, 2nd, or 3rd Ranger Battalion, or the regiment itself, you're an Army Ranger.
Okay.
If you went to school but never served in the Ranger Regiment, you are Ranger qualified.
Okay.
That's how most guys in the Army refer to it.
All right.
So, I had heartache with that for a lot of years. Because,
I know a lot of guys did.
So I went to the regiment as a young private, and a year after being there, I had an alcohol-related incident. I had a DUI. And at the time, if you had an alcohol-related incident, you had to leave. So I left the regiment after about a year and change for having this alcohol-related incident. So even though I served there, I trained there, and I was a part of that organization, I left. Well, then I never ended up going to Ranger School. It just never happened. The way path that my career took, I never did it. And so for years, people would be like, "Were you an Army Ranger?" And I would be like hesitant to say yes, because like I just described to you. Well, yeah, I was, but my brain would go, kinda.
Yeah.
like, but were you? You know what I mean? Like I had, but the reality was, is, as time went by.
Don't want to get some of the people in the US. Don't want to have them coming after you for was it stolen valor or whatever. But yeah, I guess that would have been a tricky one for him to navigate in his game.
I listened to more guys that have been there for a really long time. Is, you know, whether you spent a week, a day, or 20 years in the regiment, if you served in the regiment, you can call yourself an Army Ranger. And so eventually I got over it. And that year, that short little time that I had in that organization, you know, I got more training and leadership development in that stretch of time than I would have gotten in several years in a conventional unit. So when something bad happened like that and I had to like pull my boots up and overcome it, I think the fact that I had done all of those things in that short period of time contributed to my success when I had to go out and overcome this obstacle of having just made a mistake. So when I ended up in the regular Army, I think it allowed me to more quickly adjust to having the personal confidence that if I keep at this and excel, I can get back on track where I need to be. But that took a few years.
What's the culture like at the Ranger Regiment? Especially, you said you got in at 94, 95?
95, 96, yeah.
And Somalia was 93?
Yeah, so it's 3 years later. Yeah, culture-wise, I mean, it was the hardest training place in the Army. Like, you were always doing something. So, you know, you got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, went and did PT every morning as a platoon or a squad, always pushing hard. You know, you had to be able to max your PT tests and all that. Like, yeah, it was some hard charging, hard training dudes, which wasn't necessarily the case in the rest of the conventional Army.
Okay, yeah.
So when you leave that, and having that been your only norm after basic training, airborne school, and all that, and then you go out to big service, and then, you know, there's dudes that are overweight, and there's guys that can barely pass their push-ups or whatever on the PT test. It's a pretty eye-opening experience because I had no idea, I had no frame of reference that the rest of the Army, even in combat arms, could frankly be like that.
Wow, that's interesting to hear. I think sounds like night and day in terms of what he's describing, but I was going to mention that it makes sense that that next level up, or what may be perceived to be the next level up, that their fitness standards and their drive and their commitment is on another level. And then when you go then to know and understand there's another level again, or maybe another 2 levels, I don't know where the Rangers and that sits. I bet it's eye-opening. It must have been crazy to go from where he was, like straight from Civvy Street, straight into, you know, a high-level operating, functioning unit with a lot of combat experience coming back. I think he said 3 years later after Somalia. And then going into, I suppose, what might be deemed the conventional, regular, the rest of the Army, and then seeing those different types. You know what? It makes me grateful for my time in the NZ Infantry Battalion, because I didn't really I spent a few more, a bit longer, I should say, probably, maybe a year and a half longer than what I did in the Australian Defence Force 4RAR Commando, or probably closer to 2 years. But it makes me grateful for the hard-charging NCOs and sergeants that I had in my rifle company. Because as I've mentioned in other videos and reactions, I was getting cleaned up by the sergeants and the corporals when it came to PT. And their standard was super high. And their expectation was high. So I'm really pleased and grateful and which makes sense too, from going into infantry, it's a combat role, yet there wasn't anything happening for us at that time, or for the unit at that time, for the battalion. But to have leaders that were pushing and making it standard for us to do PT every day after roll call, after inspection, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was easy to excel in that environment. But it was a pretty big culture shock going from one extreme to the other.
I don't want to go into it yet, but when did you go from Ranger Regiment to conventional, or did you go somewhere else and then go to conventional?
No, I went to conventional. I went from 3rd Ranger Battalion to 3rd Infantry Division. So I went from being an airborne ranger serving in the regiment to a mechanized infantry battalion, where I was riding around in tracks and tanks, because I was a 11 Charlie. So in the regiment, I was in weapons platoon. I was a mortar guy. And because I was an 11 Charlie, they had a few more options with me than they did like a standard rifleman 11 Bravo. So they sent me to what's called Kelly Hill, where 3rd Infantry Division was, still on Fort Benning. So all I did was move across post, which I think was also made it hard.
Yeah.
Because I just left over there.
Damn. Yeah, that
now I'm over here. But, most guys went what's called worldwide assignment, where you go away to some other installation or somewhere. But because I was a mortar guy, they sent me to 3rd ID.
Okay.
Worldwide assignment. How cool is that?
I've worked with a lot of other soft units, being a SEAL, and then some of my time at the agency. For some reason, I never ever got to work with the Rangers.
Wow.
So I'm interested in the culture because I don't know about it. When you get in there, in a lot of soft units, the entire team's involved in mission planning and putting together target packages and all that kind of stuff, and everybody has their specific duties, and everybody is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, all ideas are welcome to the table.
Sure.
You might get called a fool if you got a dumbass fucking idea, but
yeah.
But there's always a way to get your idea in there, and it's encouraged. Is it like that in the Ranger Regiment?
It wasn't when I was there. So Ranger Regiment back then was, they were the best trained airborne infantrymen on the planet. So they shot more, they jumped more, they fast roped, they did some things that conventional forces didn't do, but they were still run like an infantry rifle platoon.
Okay.
So you had 4 squads, you had two team leaders in each, or team leaders and squad leaders, platoon sergeant, platoon leader, first sergeant, company commander. Like, they were led like a standard rifle company when it
Very
came.
rank structured.
Very rank structured, absolutely. You had to earn your keep at the lower levels before you were, moved up the ranks and were a non-commissioned officer and in charge of people. But yeah, it was very much led like traditional, any rifle platoon anywhere in the Army.
Okay.
Yeah, nowadays, and they do a lot more than they ever used to. I would imagine it's still run relatively the same, though, because regardless of the amount of training that you've received, you're still an 18-year-old kid. You're still a 19-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. And lack the combat and personal experience to make appropriate decisions. So I imagine they still run it mostly the same, even though they do a lot more things. Like CQB wasn't really a part of a lot of what regiment did when I first got there. Now those guys are they're an extension of JSOC and hit targets on their own. And yeah, they're fully capable of doing all those things.
That's cool to hear, because I've not seen firsthand. I've seen some footage and heard of how that, like he used CQB as an example there, but how that's permeated into the conventional forces, infantry battalions, rifle companies, that sort of thing, and them picking up, and their need, due to the operational landscape, the global war on terror, etc., and the potential for future conflicts, their need to adapt, their need to have those skills so that they can function should they need to. So for me, it's awesome to see that growth, that development, that change in a positive direction. As sad as it is in terms of you're still preparing for war, it's still also, as I've mentioned in other videos, it's a necessary thing, unfortunately. But it's great to see the conventional forces getting exposure to that, getting trained in that, so that they can reach a level of proficiency which could one day save their lives or that of their mates.
Yeah, it seems like, everybody's done a lot of growing after 20 years of war. From the outside looking in to all these different units and interviewing guys, to me, it appears that the Ranger Regiment is the one that has probably grown the most professionally. And I guess coming from where they were pre 9/11 to where they are now, seems to me they've done the most changing as a whole unit. But would you agree with that?
Everybody's evolved. I think what the global war on terror, GWAT, what GWAT did was it got a lot of people doing basically direct action missions where that necessarily wasn't their previous profile. You know, as an example, you had, ODAs, you had Green Berets out there whose specialty is unconventional warfare and buy through and with stuff, using and training indigenous forces to achieve an objective, amongst a bunch of other things. But, they were doing DA, they were doing raids and assaults, and yeah, sure, maybe with some indige at some point, but they were also doing them unilaterally. Like that happened because of GWAT and so many missions and op tempo and all that stuff. And I think it happened across the soft community.
Yeah.
And I think that happened to the regiment as well. I think they got pulled in and utilized in a lot more circumstances that they necessarily weren't built for. They were built for airfield seizures. They were built for jumping into, like Just Cause in Panama or 83 in Grenada. They were built to jump in, seize an airfield, eliminate the threat on that airfield, and establish an airhead to bring in follow-on forces to do other things. Or quick reaction stuff, or whatever. What they morphed into was an independent assault force that had a capability equivalent to most special operations units. So I personally don't think it was the correct thing, but I think it's just what happened because we were so busy.
Yeah.
So they definitely grew and expanded, in my opinion. I mean, when later on in my career, I watched how we utilized the Ranger Regiment go from utilizing them in support of us to utilizing them as another action arm so that we could do more things at a time.
Oh.
And there's pros and cons to that. You expand your workforce and your ability to hit more targets at a time and do more on the battlefield. But I think you lose a little something. I think there's some things that are brought to the table with seasoned special operators that you don't necessarily get with an 18 or 19-year-old kid.
It's a great point once again. I know it makes me think of the questions that I was asked when I got to the ADF, and at 4RR in particular, and even post my time there. People ask me, why do you want to go to SASR? Wouldn't the commandos, aren't they just as good? Aren't they the same? And I remember answering those people back then. There was a few individuals from 4RR that asked me because they had heard and wondered why I was there, and or they had heard that there's this guy who had done the NZ. Actually, what they had heard was the message that went around was that there was this Kiwi SAS guy in 4RR in Sydney in Holsworthy Barracks. And so whenever people would come up, they'd think that I was this badged member of the New Zealand SAS. And I'd have to let them know, I completed the selection and passed. I got onto the cycle, but I didn't get badged. It was like the day before badging, and I didn't. And then I went in and gave them a bit of a spiel. But listening to this conversation and thinking of those questions where he talks about you can expand your workforce and you can apply more force onto more targets at once, but him mentioning, I think you lose a little something. My reply to those questions when they come, why do I want to go there? Wouldn't it just be the same? Isn't it the same as staying here in the commandos? Now, I still didn't know much about the commandos, and we were preparing and doing build-up training to deploy to East Timor, which was great. An awesome unit, awesome people, and being part of Recce Platoon. But my response was, no, it's not the same. Like there's a different level. Now, I had no point of reference from a New Zealand context. All I had was infantry battalion and then go on selection to join the SAS. So those were my only 2 points of reference. I understood that the commando unit had certain capabilities, small boating stuff. They do water stuff. They did parachuting. They did other small team jobs and that sort of thing. But it still wasn't. If it didn't have SAS in the title of the unit, then that's not why I joined, and that's not why I came to the military at that time. So, yeah, that was probably the second part to my answer in terms of what I just mentioned there. If it didn't have those 3 letters, SAS, in the title of the unit that I was applying for or that I was a part of, then that's not why I joined. And I wanted to keep going, and I was going to keep going until I got there. And I think you do lose, well, to his point, you probably would lose a little something. You might even start to birth some opinions and attitudes potentially from those that haven't been through the same selection that may start to think that, yeah, we are just the same. But yeah, that's why I think the selection is such an integral part of the SF process. The fact that Australia now, I might be going off on a tangent a little bit here, but anyway, I've started now, so I might as well keep going. But the fact that Australia has a combined, these days, from what I've heard, has a combined selection for commandos, 2 commandos, and SASR, so they do the same selection. That's where I did a Q&A not that long ago, that's where those summaries, the reports from your selection, are going to be critical in terms of identifying individuals who have those characteristics or those traits to serve within the SAS versus, there's probably a lot of similarities, but versus there being something else which may not be quite their time just yet. But commandos, they may very well be suitable for. So anyway, it makes sense in my head. I might not be articulating it as well as I could. Sorry.
I mean, it's probably, and I don't know because I don't have the experience, but it's probably similar in the SEAL community. You have the SEAL community, which is guys from 18 or 19 to the end of their career, but then you have SEAL Team 6, which is, more seasoned SEALs that have been there, done that, and learned from those experiences. And I'm sure there's some huge differences between the two.
From what I understand, is that the SEALs in America, like, they can sign up at 17. I remember reacting to the class of 234 and there was a 17-year-old. And there may have been multiple 17-year-olds, but I remember talk of one of the candidates, 17. I was like, holy heck. And I remember talking about, I doubt that I would have been ready if we were allowed to apply at 17 to go on a selection. So, yeah, I thought that was fascinating, having this younger group. But that's a great example that he shares there, the SEAL community and then SEAL Team 6 as an example, etc. So it's a good point.
Absolutely. What kind of stuff were you doing after you got through the training pipeline at the regiment?
They had a cycle. So, you'd have stretches, and this is my recollection, but, we'd have cycles where we were doing a lot of shooting and a lot of range time. And then we would do what they called fixed wing and rotary wing bilats. So fixed wing was like you do a lot of jumping and airfield seizures for a stretch and different planes and whatever. And then you do rotary wing bilats where you do a lot of, infills with helos and fast rope training and all that. You sort of had a cyclical thing. And then you had your ready force cycle where you were the on-call battalion in the event that, somebody hits 911 for the United States Army. You had to be ready to go anywhere in, I don't know what it is, like 18 hours or less or something. But so it was a typical training cycle of preparation and training, range time, the various bilats, mount training where you're doing urban stuff, patrolling training, MTTs, so little courses like, basic demolition or whatever those other skills were. And then you had your pre-deployment phase later on. If you were deploying back then, it was just your prep for if something happened phase. And then you had your down phase where you weren't on alert cycle, and they would do block leave and things like that. But
man, that sounds cool as just listening to all that. What a beast. And no wonder, the fighting force, the capabilities of the US Defense Force is what it is. How can you not improve, grow, develop, become as lethal as they are by not doing all of that sort of stuff? It's just, yeah, I think of poor old us in the NZ Defence Force, at least during my time. It's like you heard about the parachute course and you'd want to try to get on there, but just few and far between, limited by resources, etc., etc. The number of courses, locations, the logistics to travel to and from the one place, as far as I understood it anyway, whereby the training could be conducted. And then seniority takes place, it's, you're not going to have the same opportunities and level to go through all that sort of training. Then he mentioned MOUT. That's a term I haven't heard for ages. I think it was military operations in urban terrain. I think that might have been the acronym, but I remember we were using that term when I was in SASR and doing MOUT training in preparation for raids and hits and kinetic type stuff. And yeah, it just brings back a lot of memories, getting to that stage and having that opportunity to, do all the shooting, do the jumping, learn new tactics and skills, be involved in all of that sort of stuff, and apply and bring the skills that you learn and put them into, whether it's a combined training exercise or then to later use them on deployment, on operations, is, man, it's an incredible feeling, but it's also rewarding and awesome in the sense that you got to go through and train and all that sort of stuff. Whereas, I have no doubt other militaries, New Zealand, Australia included, could and would likely be equal to, if not, I'd say equal to, if they had access to the same types of resources and opportunity to train and all that. But the reality is that we don't. But for these two countries, New Zealand and Australia, man, they still produce, in my opinion, they produce some hearty soldiers anyway, put it that way. That's 31 minutes on there, so I'm going to look to wrap this up now. But appreciate your time, mate. Really enjoying now as we're getting more into this and learning a bit more about the Ranger Regiment and the differences between somebody that's Ranger qualified and who's served as a Ranger. Bits and pieces from what I can remember. I'll probably forget half of it anyway. And then hearing a bit about this guy, Chris VanSant's journey into the military and being at near the pointy end and then coming back to a more conventional, maybe a step or two below, and then working his way back up, and then ultimately I assume we'll get to it when he gets to Delta Force, the tip of the spear, tier 1. So appreciate your time and support if you made it this far. As always, for those that might need the reminder, I've received some messages recently saying thanks for the reminder that I have at the end of the video, which is always the same. The message is always the same. I know people out there, I'm no different, can and will go through hard times at different times. And so just regardless of whatever those challenges, difficulties, hardships are, the reminder is for you and I and for us to just keep turning up, to keep staying in the fight, to put one foot in front of the other and to take one day at a time, to be and to speak kinder to ourselves. It's okay to not be okay. And as one of the kind supporters of my channel has reminded me and put in one of the comments, it's a good time for us to speak to ourselves as if we were speaking to a loved one or a close friend and we were trying to encourage them. So hopefully we can all take that reminder on board and apply it to ourselves as and when and if we need to at this time. Know that you're not alone. Know that the sun will shine again, that there are better days ahead, and those better days are closer than you and I think, and that there is a light at the end of that tunnel. So as always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.